I think, today we heard quite a bit about access to insurance, and I think something that really resonated is that this is an issue that is not just technical. Financial health and the ability to manage risks are deeply interconnected. When people can access insurance that is genuinely designed for their lives, that's affordable, understandable, and trustworthy, it changes not just how they recover from a single shock, but how they plan, invest, and build over time. And I think that reflects some of the comments that were made by Sophie earlier. Yet, across the world, for many households, that protection simply does not exist. So we have 30 minutes, I hope that's still the case, to explore this. And really 30 minutes with two remarkable guests. So I really want to again welcome Her Majesty, Queen Máxima, and also Guillaume Borie for this conversation this morning. So I'd like to get right into it with the first question, which is, there's a growing recognition that insurance can play an important role in helping households to manage shocks and build resilience. But Your Majesty, from your perspective, where are you seeing the most promising approaches emerge in practice? And how should we think about insurance as part of a broader financial health ecosystem? And we heard Sophie talk about the work that you've done in that space and your significant travel around the globe, meeting with different partners. It'd be great to hear your reflections.
Well, first of all, it's extremely nice to be here in this very warm Paris. Very warm welcome indeed. And to be here at AXA, and that's been a very long partner of my work. And I want to start by saying something. I started doing financial inclusion already in 2008. And I pivoted to financial health actually 4 years ago. And why did I have this journey? Long time ago, I started with the notion that people actually needed insurance, savings, credit to actually make ends meet. Somewhere around, I realized that if I didn't have a bank account, there's no way I could actually give them those insurance, savings, or credits. So then my journey of financial inclusion started. So we started defining this issue about including people. Now, somewhere along the way, we started with 40+% of the world population that had access. We got into above 80%. So it was a great success. But the issue is, are we really improving people's lives? So I had to go back to where I started and say, we need to actually, in those rails that we actually built these last years, so this inclusion, we need to actually do what is actually right, the outcome. What do we want? We want to make people's financial lives better. And that's where financial health was born. Actually, it was born for a long time ago, to me trying to get the definition with some partners. And it was very nicely put out there. What is financial health? It's the ability for people to make day-to-day finances meet. Is second, to be resilient every time you have a shock, to be able to sort of, to stand up again and continue with your life. And third is to be able to actually have a long-term goals be, attainable. Is it a house? Is it sort of the studies of your children? And third, feel confident, because when you don't feel confident, then other issues actually start to become wrong. So what do we want? And this is where insurance actually plays a very important role. Insurance is extremely important for the resilience part. What actually happens to you when in face of a shock? And I've actually seen it. When people face shocks, they sell livelihoods, their own one thing that actually makes their, their income being produced. Or they basically stop sending their children to school. We've actually seen girls actually tend not to go to school when actually these issues actually happen. And they actually have very tough coping mechanisms, like getting into sort of money lender with very high interest rates. And what actually happened, and Sophie mentioned it upstairs, what actually is very important about this is that it's not only sort of the household in itself. When the moment a household actually gets a shock like that, they stop investing in even more productive assets. And this is a very important issue, because the moment we're going to start seeing that people are covered, they're resilient, we're going to start seeing growth. They're going to start seeing sort of, people are going to dare to actually make those investments because they know their base necessities are going to be covered. So one of the most promising examples that I've actually seen are the ones really that look at people's needs. Gaz was just talking about back to the future. And I would like to say back to basics. is actually looking at the needs of the clients and what their risks are. And how do we actually help them overcome those risks in a way that is affordable and where they are, very important. Are they in the markets? Are they on the farms? You know, certainly with the mobile phones. Financial inclusion is a means to an end. It's a tool that helps us with the telecoms, with AI. Those are all tools. These are very nice things to actually be talking about. But in the end of the day, you don't have the design of the product right. You're not going to have the distribution. You're not going to have the demand. You're not going to have the trust. And you're not going to have the inclusion either because it's not going to be demanded.
Excellent. I really appreciated back to basics. And you referenced trust, which is important in the conversation around insurance and how do we actually get to people. Really, I think, quite an important point. But I'll turn over to you, Guillaume. You sit in the heart of a large insurance company. We heard earlier the conversation around scale, right? How do you make this a viable business while also meeting a public objective? So at AXA, why is it important to focus on financial health and inclusion in product design and delivery through AXA EssentiALL? So elaborate a little bit more on what we would have heard earlier this morning.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure being with you this morning on this critical question for us. I won't come back first, even if it's probably the most important, on why we see this topic as being absolutely critical, core to our very purpose. I think this morning, Sophie, Garance articulated it already extremely well. And it's absolutely obvious to us that insurance is a core component to the resilience of societies and that we are part of this global financial health ecosystem. And being one of the leading insurance companies in the world, we see as being core to our responsibility to be able to meet this increasing demand. So that's the very essence of our purpose. I would be even ready to say that it's the core of our duties in terms of companies acting in a responsible way in society. What is fundamental beyond that is that it's a core business issue for us. And it goes back to what you just shared with us, Your Majesty. It goes back to the very essence of the needs of our customers in the end. And the reality we are facing across all of our markets in the emerging world, but in the developed markets as well, is that we have unmet needs. There are many situations where we see significant production gaps and where our offer indeed is not well suited to answer those needs. And that's why I really like what you said on go back to basics. And the way we have experienced it over the past 10 years with AXA EssentiALL under the leadership of Garance is the very fact that on many, many occasions, we just had to go back to basics. Things that you would be maybe surprised, but things that because you are in the middle of your day-to-day life, managing BAU topics, you no longer look at. Are you absolutely sure that your products are designed in order to meet the needs of your end customer? It's a very basic question, but a question that in many cases we are no longer asking ourselves. So we had to do that, starting in the emerging world. And in those emerging markets, obviously, we immediately saw that we had billions of people that basically had absolutely no insurance coverage. So where do you start? You start with answering three very simple questions. Affordability. Are you sure that you have a solution that is affordable to everyone? You have to go back to the issue of trust. Trust comes with our brand, but it comes also with our daily behaviors of employees, practices, the way we deal with consumers. And you have to go back to the most fundamental question, and you already mentioned it, distribution in the end. How do you access to the end consumer, knowing that insurance is a product that you need to sell? Absolutely nobody in the world is waking up in the morning wondering, oh, where can I buy insurance? It doesn't exist. Not anywhere in the world. So you have to deal with that. And distribution in many cases does require partnerships. So we had to work on all those elements that are basic elements of our business model. And I have the view that it has helped us improve on our entire business, not just addressing this production gap, but revisiting the way we look at our business globally speaking and how we can transform in a much more relevant way to meet the need of our customers.
Thank you, Guillaume. So it's a matter of relevance, but it's also the billions are an opportunity, fundamentally from a corporate perspective. So turning again back to you, Her Majesty, the UNSGSA has championed inclusive finance across many markets, and you referenced that earlier. Where are you seeing the most promising models for actually expanding access in insurance in ways that help strengthen household resilience and financial security over time? And what conditions are needed to be in place to help these models succeed and build trust, referencing your point earlier?
You know, I think we have to learn of the good examples, but also from the bad examples.
Yes.
I was last in Indonesia, and I always, when I go to countries, I make focus groups of people, and then I talk to them, and I ask them about sort of financial lives, what goes well, what goes wrong, and I ask them about insurers, I ask them about savings, and I ask them about sort of, you know, how do they take credit. And there was, I would say, sort of middle, lower class, middle income person, and he told me that he bought a bike, in which he actually does most of his job with it, and he got very well. He got embedded insurance. Amazing. So I said, hey, that's good. And he paid it together with the payment that he did of his bike. Of course, like life actually happens, he had an accident. And then the nightmare started. He had to sort of, fill in claims through claims, and then they came to see the bike, and then finally he got paid back 3 months later. You know what, the next day, he actually indebted himself, bought another bike because he needed to actually keep on making money with his bike. So, it was nice to get the distribution out there, but you lost completely this client. There's no trust in insurance. No more trust. So the whole product needs to be there. So you need to think about sort of, with the seller of the bikes, he has to get a bike immediately the next day so he can actually do the work. Then you solve it in the back, and you figure out with the seller of the bike how you're going to do the whole insurance. And when you realize this client constantly have accidents, well, you're not going to insure him anymore. But that's afterwards. But I think this is a very important issue. The other thing is we also talked about sort of, the affordability side and, the commerciability of it. It's going to take time to actually make a product like that, embedded with many partners. I mean, we see Pula, it's an amazing organization which doesn't even have the shoulders of a company like AXA. And this company has actually been able to sell seeds together with a credit to be able to buy them with insurance. At the moment that 20% of your harvest is gone because of lack of rains, you get paid on your phone that 20%. No questions asked. And the demand has been growing tremendously. Yes, it took us 5 years to get break even, but this was a small company. So I just wonder, in all this issue about all these pilots that I've actually seen that actually have been wonderful, that they never really surpassed the 20,000 customers. Where are 1 million customer, models? And this really, I want to sort of, put it to the group, because we need to. There's somebody here from JP Morgan Chase. I have worked very closely to the financial health group on JP Morgan and Chase. And ideally, at JP Morgan, when they come up with a new product, they say it will take us 5 years to make basically break even. They start with financial health, it took them 2 years. I made double the customers that actually had the target. So when done properly, financial health would actually come back with returns much quicker than you think. But you have to have a long-term ability. And I do wonder if maybe the best thing to do is, given that sometimes when you are such a big company and you have so many regulations and internal affairs issues and lawyers and, how do you sort of, that maybe you should actually do a completely startup apart from your company, and you're going to back them until they do the learning part that they bring you to the, million clients and you need, and it's completely branded very differently. Because sometimes things cannot grow within sort of very big organizations. And I understand that, but these are things that we also have to think about. I'm going to give you some examples. Sewa, a group of self-help women, they actually give their women, and they make money out of it, with a cost of $2 a month, they give them a parametric insurance in case of very high temperatures. When above 45 degrees, it just hits and it just pays back the woman, because above that type of temperatures, these ladies, they cannot work anymore and they lose income. Those 3-4 days at, temperatures of 50s, they cannot work anymore. And they get paid that income they actually lose. No questions asked. They get paid. And it's been increasing tremendously. So we have to start thinking, what are the risks and what are the realities of people on the ground, and start looking, certainly with partnering, but how to bring that insurance that is affordable and, take the risk yourselves. You know about risk. You have to take the risk yourself of actually sort of growing that business in the next coming years.
So thank you for that. Really challenging, I guess, the insurance industry in terms of, okay, the customers, we say the billions, but what does it take to actually reach those customers, right? And I think the AXA EssentiALL, when you talk about incubating an innovator within a company, perhaps speaks to some of the things that, as a corporate, you have tried to do. But I'll try and shift a little bit more to a theme that we heard earlier in the morning, which was this balance between the experiences in emerging markets and also more mature markets. There's often an assumption when we talk about inclusive insurance that it is really a challenge of the emerging world. But financial vulnerability and protection gaps exist also in emerging markets, as was heard earlier. Are protection gaps in mature markets now as urgent as those in emerging markets? It'd be good to hear your reflections on that. And I would also say, are there any synergies in inclusive insurance across emerging markets and the mature world, or are we dealing with fundamentally different problems and different solutions? Again, reflecting on earlier comments made.
So I would say that there also, if you look at the difference between the emerging world and the developed markets, you have to go back to the question of the relevance of our business. And in the end, when you work in a private company, obviously, I would say, you're developing propositions for your customers and you want to make money out of it. Garance mentioned this morning the memory of our founder, Claude Bébéard, and our founder used to say, making money is just your right to be in the room. But in the end, that's not your purpose, that's not why you're here, and in the end, what we expect from everyone in the company is to answer the basic question, how are you making this money? Is it in a responsible way? And is it in a way you're relevant to your customers? When you look at the situation we are experiencing today in many of our developed markets, starting with this country, France, the reality is that there is a growing protection gap. And that's what we want to address. Why so? Because in particular in this continent, Europe, which is to a certain extent the welfare state land, in this continent, the reality is that there is a growing protection gap between the safety net provided by public authorities and public systems and the insurance proposition of many private players. And right in the middle of that, you have a growing part of the population, according to most of our studies, close to a quarter of the population. So we are not speaking about nothing. Close to a quarter of the population that is either underserved or ill-served by insurers. Why so? Because they can no longer afford having the proper protection, having the proper coverage. I will just take a single example. If you're a single mother in France raising your 2 kids 50 kilometers from where you work, every morning you take your car to go to work. The day you have an accident or an issue with your car, in many cases, because you're a single mother raising your 2 kids with just one salary, you have arbitrated the full coverage of your car insurance. And you just have liability, which is the only part that is made mandatory by law. So when you have that kind of accident, what is going on? Nobody is offering you a replacement for your car, and you are entitled to nothing. That's when you start being unable to go to work, and that's when a number of other issues are coming. That's exactly what we have worked on with all the teams in order to review the way we sell our car insurance products. the way we exercise our duty of advice, the way we give modular products to make sure that in the end you pay for what you need, but only for what you need. And it does require training of your distribution networks, revamping of your products, making sure that everyone is aligned on why you are doing that. That's a question that we have in each and every of our developed countries. So that's a matter of relevance. And that's a matter indeed of replicating experiences that we have had over the past 10 years in the emerging world. And we have done that through AXA EssentiALL, and that's where it's critical in a company that is that big to be able for us to invest in common capabilities. Because in the end, even if each market is different, you do see some commonalities in terms of the topics that you have to solve for. And I don't come back to that. We mentioned them, affordability, distribution, how you look at a systematic framework in order to assess the relevance of your products. All of that is what the expertise that is brought by AXA EssentiALL and how we are replicating from one market to another, while, if you want to be relevant, while making sure that locally our teams are fully empowered in order to deliver the end proposal to the customers.
So I am conscious of time, and I will go into a final just closing reflections from you. And it will actually build, maybe force you to expand a little bit deeper into your closing comments. The fact is that we are living in a world of compounding risks. It's climate shocks, it's social conflict, it's increasing cost of living that are impacting households around the world, emerging and also developed markets. In one sentence each, it's the challenge. What gives you the most confidence that insurance can actually meet this moment? And I'll start with you, Guillaume, before Majesty.
Thank you very much. Well, if I had to pick only one sentence, I would say that my biggest hope or confidence is the very fact that we are now moving in a much more common way, meaning together within the sector, and forums such as the Insurance Development Forum is helping us on that, but also much more now together with public authorities. And I think that we are progressively moving into a world where everyone is realizing that in front of the many risks that you are describing, what we call systemic risk in this company, if you want to come up with good solutions, you cannot do it on your own. You have to work with public authorities, with NGOs, with everyone in order to build the most aggregated and relevant solutions. So that's what is giving me hope.
Excellent. More than one sentence. So, Your Majesty, you get more sentences.
I was trying to figure out, you know, that I'm going to get my right of having the very long sentence too. So, listen, I think the one thing that is actually very exciting then, since I started sort of, you know, pivoting to sort of financial health, is the amount of interest that is actually been getting, because, I mean, like you just mentioned, this is a very universal issue. In the Netherlands, 22% of the Dutch population are unhealthy, and another 25% is actually vulnerable. So it's just one car sort of breakage down to actually get into an unhealthy situation again. So there is, I think, an understanding that you have to be part of the puzzle of this very big financial health, and you cannot do it alone. So that's number one. Number two, we will need to start thinking in much more innovative and different ways in terms of our partnerships, and that means that regulation has to go with you. And I hope that we can actually open those conversations as well, because whilst we here are, you know, of course I need to sort of, you know, focus only on the risk and insurance side, but there's a role to be played to employers, to another financial service providers, and also sellers of products, etc. Because, I mean, don't get me started with buy now, pay laters and other issues. But I think we are here and we're specialists for risks, but if we don't take the risk to do the right thing, we will have the risk of becoming irrelevant. And that's how I want to end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Her Majesty. And just to close and say thank you for what I thought was as a conversation that was as honest as it was hopeful. And so my hope is that through this discussion that we've had here this morning, that we can all use that to infuse the rest of the day. And this idea that insurance, when it is well designed and delivered well, it is one of the most powerful tools for turning vulnerability into resilience and resilience ultimately into opportunity. So thank you both.